Police Commissioner Wallace falls to his knees on national television as President Andrews publicly fires him. Behind the podium stands Janelle Wright, her eyes fierce but tired. 3 months ago, she was just a hospital administrator. Now, after what they did to her daughter, America would never be the same. Before I dive into this shocking true story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories of ordinary people standing up against injustice. How would you react if your child was brutalized by those sworn to protect? Let's see how one mother's determination changed an entire nation. Janelle Wright never imagined that an ordinary Friday would become the day her world collapsed. At 39, she had built a respectable life as the administrative director at Westfield Memorial Hospital, where her meticulous attention to detail and problem-solving skills had earned her the respect of doctors and staff alike. Few of her colleagues knew about her previous career as a Navy intelligence analyst, where she had developed skills that would soon become her most valuable weapons. Westfield, a mid-sized city with gleaming downtown buildings that cast shadows over neighborhoods, still bearing the scars of historical segregation, had always been a place of quiet tension where racial incidents simmered beneath a veneer of progress. Janelle had chosen to raise her daughter Zora here because of the Science Magnet program at Westfield Academy, where 16-year-old Zora had flourished. With perfect SAT scores and early acceptance letters already arriving from MIT and Stanford, Zora represented everything Janelle had sacrificed for. That Friday had started like any other, with Janelle reminding Zora to call when she reached the community center for the youth rally supporting racial equality. As the hospital's youngest department head, Janelle had meetings scheduled until 7, but she had promised to pick Zora up afterward. "Mom, I'll be fine," Zora had said, with the eye roll only teenagers can perfect. Trevor's mom is chaperoning, and it's just a discussion about voter registration and community involvement. Janelle remembered kissing her daughter's forehead, noticing how Zora's natural hair was styled in the same way she had worn hers during her own teenage activism days. "I know, baby. I'm proud of you for caring about these issues. Just stay aware of your surroundings, okay?" The irony of that warning would haunt Janelle for months afterward. At 6:37, while reviewing budget proposals in her office, Janelle's phone lit up with a text from Trevor's mother, police raiding the center. No reason given, kids being separated by race. Calling my husband. Janelle immediately tried calling Zora, but the call went straight to voicemail. 10 minutes later, as she was grabbing her keys to leave, her office phone rang. The voice of Dr. Santos, chief of emergency medicine, sent ice through her veins. "Janelle, you need to come to the ER now. It's Zora." The next 20 minutes were a blur, as Janelle raced from the administrative wing to the emergency department, her heels clicking against the linoleum like a ticking clock. What she found there would forever divide her life into before and after. Zora lay unconscious on a trauma bed, her face swollen beyond recognition, blood matting her beautiful hair. A cervical collar stabilized her neck, and a ventilator breathed for her. Dr. Santos pulled Janelle aside as nurses worked frantically around her daughter. She was brought in by ambulance from the community center. Police claim she attacked an officer and fell, hitting her head. But Janelle, his voice dropped to a whisper. "The injuries don't match that story. This is a severe beating. She has a skull fracture, brain swelling, 3 broken ribs, and her spleen may be ruptured. We're prepping her for emergency surgery and a CT scan." Janelle stood frozen, her administrative composure cracking like thin ice. Who did this to her doctor? Santos looked around before responding. "Officer Brady Miller is listed as the arresting officer. But there's something else you should know. The paramedics reported a significant delay in treatment. Almost an hour between initial police contact and when they were allowed to transport her." Before Janelle could process this information, a nurse approached with a plastic bag containing Zora's belongings. "Her clothes are evidence now, but here's her jewelry and wallet." "I'm sorry, but there was no phone." The absence of Zora's phone immediately registered with Janelle. Zora documented everything, especially at events like this. If there had been trouble, she would have recorded it. As medical staff prepared to move Zora to surgery, Janelle kissed her daughter's bruised hand and whispered, "I'm here, baby. I'm going to find out who did this." In the waiting room, the small television mounted in the corner showed Officer Clayton Reed, the police department spokesman, already spinning a narrative. During an operation to investigate reported drug activity at the community center, a 16-year-old female became violent with officers, striking Officer Miller multiple times before officers could restrain her. During the struggle, the suspect sustained injuries when she resisted arrest. Toxicology tests are pending, but officers reported signs of substance use. Janelle felt her blood boil at the blatant lies. Zora had never even tasted alcohol, let alone used drugs. As she watched other parents from the rally arrive at the hospital, Janelle noticed the pattern immediately. Only black teenagers had been arrested or injured. White participants had been released or never detained. Hours later, after Zora's surgery, Dr. Santos found Janelle in the ICU, beside her still unconscious daughter. The neurosurgeon says she's in a coma. The next 48 hours are critical. I'm so sorry, Janelle. Exhausted and devastated, Janelle finally allowed tears to fall. But as she watched the steady rise and fall of her daughter's chest, something else stirred inside her. A cold, focused rage that she hadn't felt since her military days. She pulled out her notebook and began to write. Time of incident. Names of officers involved. Witnesses present. Discrepancies in the police statement. As the night deepened, Janelle Wright transformed from a worried mother into something the Westfield Police Department could never have anticipated their worst nightmare. She looked at her beautiful daughter tubes and wires, connecting her broken body to machines, and made a silent promise. They picked the wrong child. They picked the wrong mother. I will burn their whole corrupt system to the ground. And as the first rays of morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, Janelle began to plan. 3 days passed with Zora remaining in critical condition, her brain activity concerning the specialists who frowned at her scans and spoke in hushed tones outside her ICU room. Janelle barely left her daughter's side except to shower in the hospital staff locker room, surviving on cafeteria, coffee, and the sandwiches that sympathetic nurses left for her. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Zora's broken body, fueling a determination that grew stronger as the police department's machinery of denial and cover-up began to move against them. Janelle's first attempts to seek justice followed the proper channels, believing naively that the system would correct such an obvious injustice. She filed a detailed complaint with the Internal Affairs Division, cataloging the inconsistencies in the official report and requesting the body camera footage from all officers present. The detective who took her statement, a white man with cold eyes who never once asked about Zora's condition, merely nodded and said, "We'll be in touch." When Janelle called City Hall, the mayor's secretary promised to forward her concerns to the appropriate parties. The hospital's patient advocate seemed genuinely distressed, but warned Janelle that police matters were complicated. By the end of the week, Janelle realized that evidence was vanishing like morning mist. The community center's security cameras had malfunctioned during the exact time period of the raid. Witnesses reported being visited by officers who just wanted to clarify their statements, leaving them too frightened to speak further. The body camera footage was declared unavailable due to technical issues. It was then that Detective Marcus Jones entered Zora's hospital room, closing the door quietly behind him. As one of the few black officers in the department, his presence on the force was often tokenized in department photos and community events. "Mrs. Wright," he said softly, checking that they were alone. "I shouldn't be here, but what happened to your daughter wasn't right." Over the next 20 minutes, Detective Jones revealed the rot at the heart of the Westfield Police Department. Chief Raymond Wallace, appointed 10 years ago, despite multiple excessive force complaints from his previous position, had created a culture where brutality against minorities was not just tolerated, but tacitly encouraged. Evidence in cases involving officer misconduct routinely disappeared. Officers who reported violations found themselves assigned to dangerous districts without backup. "Your daughter's phone is in Officer Miller's locker," Jones whispered. "He took it because she was recording. That footage would show exactly what happened, but if I try to access it, they'll know it was me." As Detective Jones left, promising to help however he could, without compromising his position, Janelle's phone rang with a local news number. The reporter wanted her response to newly released information about Zora's troubled past and history of anti-police sentiment. Turning on the television in Zora's room, Janelle watched in horror as Officer Clayton Reed stood at a podium, his voice grave. "Our investigation has revealed that Zora Wright was part of an organized effort to provoke officers and create a media incident. Her social media accounts show a pattern of anti-police rhetoric, and witnesses report she was agitating other youths to confront officers." The station broadcasting this character assassination was WKPD, owned by media mogul Victor Reynolds, a major donor to police charities and close friend of Chief Wallace. Janelle's fury reached new heights when her supervisor at the hospital, Patricia Coleman, called her into a brief meeting in the ICU family room. "Janelle, I understand you're going through a terrible time." Coleman began, her sympathetic tone belied by her tense posture. "But the hospital board is concerned about your allegations against the police department. We have contracts with the city, and your actions could be seen as a conflict of interest. Perhaps it would be best to let the proper authorities handle this matter." The message was clear: stand down or risk your career. That evening, leaving Zora under the watch of a trusted nurse, Janelle drove to the community center where the raid had occurred. The building was dark, except for one room where Darius King, a 25-year-old community organizer, was sorting through damaged equipment. When Janelle introduced herself as Zora's mother, his expression shifted from wariness to profound sadness. "I tried to help her," he said, his voice cracking. "When those officers started beating her, I tried to get to her, but they threatened to shoot anyone who interfered." Darius introduced Janelle to several teenagers who had witnessed the attack, including Emma Larson, a white college student who had been volunteering at the event. Unlike the black participants, Emma had been allowed to leave without being searched or questioned. More importantly, she had been recording on her phone and had immediately uploaded the footage to secure cloud storage. "I knew they might try to take my phone," Emma explained, showing Janelle the horrifying video. The footage showed Zora standing against a wall phone raised clearly, documenting officers separating black and white attendees. Officer Miller approached her, demanding she stop recording. When Zora calmly stated her First Amendment right to film police in public, Miller knocked the phone from her hand. As Zora reached for it, Miller and 3 other officers pushed her to the ground. The video captured Zora's screams as batons struck her repeatedly, her desperate plea that she couldn't breathe, and finally the terrifying silence as she lost consciousness. Through tears of rage, Janelle watched Officers Miller and Reed laughing as paramedics were kept waiting outside. The video ended with an officer noticing Emma recording and moving toward her. "The world needs to see this," Janelle said, copying the video file. "But first, we need to make sure it can't disappear." When Janelle returned home that night to collect more clothes, she found her front door slightly ajar. Inside, her house had been ransacked, drawers emptied onto floors, furniture slashed open. Her computer was missing, along with all external hard drives and flash drives. She called the police, and 2 officers arrived, looking around with barely concealed smirks. "Probably just a random burglary, ma'am," one offered, without taking fingerprints or photos. "Lots of those in this neighborhood lately." That night, back at the hospital, the first threatening call came to Janelle's cell phone. "Drop it or your daughter won't be the only one in a hospital bed." The voice was disguised, but the message was unmistakable. Instead of intimidating her, the call crystallized something in Janelle's mind. She was no longer just fighting for Zora. She was fighting a system designed to crush anyone who challenged it. Drawing on her military intelligence training, Janelle began creating secure documentation of everything. Multiple copies of Emma's video stored on encrypted drives hidden with trusted friends, detailed timelines, names of every officer, involved photos of Zora's injuries taken from multiple angles with medical staff as witnesses. She created a secure email account, accessible only through a VPN, and began sending evidence to herself, establishing an unalterable timeline. In her hospital room journal, which never left her sight, she mapped the connections she was discovering between Chief Wallace and Mayor Thompson, between the police department and Reynolds Media Group, between city contracts and officers, with suspicious financial windfalls. A pattern was emerging, one of corruption and collusion that went far beyond her daughter's case. As Zora lay unmoving, machines breathing for her, Janelle whispered a new promise. "I was trained to identify enemy networks and dismantle them piece by piece. They have no idea who they're up against." The bruises on her daughter's face were beginning to fade to sickly yellows and greens, but Janelle's resolve was only hardening. The system had declared war on her child, and now this former military intelligence analyst was preparing to strike back. 2 weeks into Zora's coma, the medical bills were already mounting to astronomical figures. Insurance was covering some costs, but the hospital's financial counselor had delicately mentioned that Zora's law enforcement encounter might complicate coverage of certain treatments. When Janelle's paid leave expired, Human Resources informed her that she would need to take unpaid family medical leave, cutting off her income entirely. Director Coleman's carefully worded email suggested that given the circumstances, Janelle might want to consider whether her professional future lies elsewhere. The financial pressure was a calculated tactic, Janelle realized, another way to force her to abandon her fight for justice. Just as the walls seemed to be closing and her ex-husband Michael arrived from Atlanta. Their divorce 5 years earlier had been amicable, but distant, with Michael's corporate law career taking precedence over family time. Seeing him in the hospital doorway, his normally confident posture slumped with shock as he stared at their daughter Janelle, felt a complicated surge of emotions. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, approaching Zora's bedside slowly. "What happened to our baby girl?" His initial reaction was painfully predictable. What was she even doing at that rally, Janelle? You know how these situations can escalate. Why wasn't she focusing on her college applications instead of getting involved in protests? The accusation hung in the air that somehow Janelle's parenting had led to this tragedy. But something shifted when Janelle wordlessly handed him her tablet with Emma's video queued up. Michael, who had defended corporate clients against discrimination claims for 15 years, watched the brutal assault on his daughter with his hand pressed against his mouth. When the video ended, he sat in silence for several minutes before asking, in a voice she had never heard before, "What do you need me to do? Has someone you trusted ever let you down when you needed them most?" Comment number 1. If you've experienced betrayal from someone who should have protected you. Like this video if you believe family should always stick together during a crisis, and subscribe to see more stories of parental courage. What would you do if the entire system was working against you and your child? Would you fight back or surrender to protect what little you had left? For Janelle Wright, help would come from the most unexpected sources. Michael's transformation from skeptic to ally became Janelle's first real victory. Using his legal connections, he arranged a meeting with Sophia Washington, a renowned civil rights attorney whose firm specialized in police brutality cases. In Sophia's downtown office, surrounded by case files and legal texts, Janelle and Michael laid out everything they had gathered. Sophia's reaction was both encouraging and disturbing. "This isn't the first case like this I've seen from Wallace's department," she explained, pulling several thick folders from her cabinet. "In the past 5 years, I've represented 7 black families whose children were assaulted by Westfield officers. All the cases were buried. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses were intimidated. Internal affairs found no wrongdoing. But your daughter's case is different." When Janelle asked what made Zora's case special, Sophia's answer was simple: you. Most families are too traumatized, too afraid, or too financially strained to fight back with this level of organization and evidence preservation. Your military background gives you skills that other victims' families don't have. As Sophia began preparing a civil rights lawsuit, another unexpected ally emerged. Andre Peterson, a local reporter who had largely been sidelined at the Westfield Chronicle for his aggressive coverage of police misconduct, approached Janelle in the hospital cafeteria. "My brother was beaten into a wheelchair by cops 10 years ago," he said without preamble. "The department ruined his life, then ruined his reputation so no one would care. I've been trying to expose Wallace's corruption for years, but my editor blocks anything too critical of the department. Reynolds Media Group just bought our paper, and they're about to fire me. Before I go, I want to help you." Andre provided Janelle with access to his years of research, internal department emails he had obtained from sources' statistical analyses showing racial disparities in arrests and use of force, and most critically information about Officer Brady Miller's history. Miller has 17 excessive force complaints in his 8 years on the force, Andre revealed, all dismissed. 3 involved teenagers, all black. 1 boy lost an eye from Miller's baton, but the department claimed he injured himself resisting arrest. Detective Jones continued his clandestine assistance, slipping Janelle internal documents showing how evidence in police misconduct cases routinely disappeared under the supervision of Internal Affairs Captain Robert Freeman Wallace's former partner and fishing buddy. Jones also confirmed that Officer Miller was bragging about teaching Zora a lesson about respecting authority with no fear of consequences. As her network of allies grew, Janelle converted her basement into what Michael jokingly called the war room. Maps of Westfield covered one wall with red pins marking locations of previous police brutality incidents. Another wall tracked the connections between Wallace Mayor Thompson and other power players in the city. Emma's video, meanwhile, had begun circulating on social media, despite aggressive efforts to discredit it. Reynolds news outlets called it selectively edited and lacking context. But as view counts climbed into the hundreds of thousands, The department's narrative became increasingly difficult to maintain. The community response began to build. Peaceful protesters gathered daily outside police headquarters, holding signs with Zora's yearbook photo and the slogan, "Who protects us from you?" The department's response: officers in riot gear, aggressive dispersal tactics, and that means dozens of questionable arrests, only generated more negative attention and more damning footage. 3 weeks after the assault, Janelle received a surprising call from Congressman Thomas Ward, representing Westfield's district. Known as a moderate who rarely took controversial positions, Ward requested a private meeting away from cameras and reporters. In a quiet corner of the hospital chapel, Ward revealed his personal stake. 10 years ago, my son was at a college party that was raided. He's biracial, though most people don't know that he can pass for white. When officers realized who he was, they beat him severely and then charged him with assaulting an officer. I used every connection I had to get the charges dropped and the record sealed to protect his future. Ward paused, his hands shaking slightly. I've been silent too long about what happened, about what continues to happen. Your daughter's case is too egregious to ignore, and your evidence is too solid to dismiss. I'm ready to provide political support for a Justice Department investigation. That same day brought another breakthrough. Dr. Amara Liu, the county medical examiner who had been asked to review Zora's toxicology report, contacted Sophia Washington directly rather than submitting her findings through normal channels. The initial report was altered, she stated firmly. Someone attempted to add positive results for marijuana and cocaine to the samples. I ran my own tests. Zora Wright had absolutely no drugs or alcohol in her system at the time of the incident. I've documented the attempted falsification, and I'm prepared to testify. For the first time since Zora's attack, Janelle felt a spark of hope. The isolated mother fighting an impossible battle was now at the center of a growing coalition. Legal, medical, media, and political allies, all committed to exposing the truth. That evening, as Michael took the first watch at Zora's bedside, allowing Janelle a few hours of actual sleep, she allowed herself a small smile. Her military instructors had always emphasized that the most important asset in any operation wasn't weapons or technology, but people. Finding the right allies with the right capabilities at the right time. As she drifted towards sleep, Janelle thought about the web of support forming around her daughter. They were still outgunned and out-resourced, facing a system designed to protect itself at all costs. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone in the fight. And sometimes that made all the difference. The police department's response to the growing pressure was swift and vicious. Officer Clayton Reed called a press conference on the steps of headquarters, standing before a sea of blue uniforms in a show of departmental unity. Recent allegations against our officers are not only false but defamatory, he announced with practiced indignation. Our investigation has uncovered disturbing information about Zora Wright that the public needs to know. What followed was character assassination, dressed as concerned disclosure. Reed displayed enlarged screenshots of social media posts, allegedly from Zora's accounts, showing her at what he described as gang-related events. The photos, clearly manipulated, showed a girl who resembled Zora throwing gang signs and holding what appeared to be a weapon. This was not an honor student randomly targeted by police, Reed continued. This was a troubled young woman with a pattern of antisocial behavior, who attacked our officers when they attempted to question her about drug activity. Within hours, these fabricated images saturated local news and social media. Fake accounts with names like Truth About Zora appeared overnight, sharing doctored photos and invented stories about Zora's supposed violent tendencies. The digital assault extended to Janelle as well. Someone leaked her college disciplinary record, showing a citation for participating in a campus protest 20 years earlier, which Reynolds media outlets inflated into a history of radical anti-authority activities. Anonymous sources suddenly emerged, claiming Janelle was an unstable and neglectful mother who had encouraged her daughter's dangerous behavior. Hospital administration increased their pressure. Director Coleman called Janelle into a formal meeting with HR representatives present. Your continued pursuit of these allegations is creating a hostile environment, Coleman stated, while avoiding eye contact. Several staff members have expressed concern about working with someone who is publicly attacking our city's police department. The board believes it would be best for all parties if you resigned your position. When Janelle refused, citing her employment rights and pointing out that terminating her would appear retaliatory, Coleman's expression hardened. Very well. But be aware that any use of hospital resources or discussion of your personal situation during work hours will be considered grounds for immediate dismissal. The department's internal cleansing began as well. Detective Jones was placed on administrative leave pending investigation of evidence mishandling, a transparent response to the suspected internal leak. Officer Reed publicly stated that certain elements within the department may have been compromised by outside influences seeking to undermine law enforcement credibility. Michael's law firm called him back to Atlanta for an emergency partner meeting. His managing partner was blunt. Several of our largest clients have municipal contracts with Westfield. They've made it clear that your involvement in this case represents a conflict of interest. Either withdraw your support for this lawsuit, or your partnership will be put to a vote. Michael returned to Westfield that evening with his resignation letter already submitted. I've got 20 years of savings, he told Janelle, with a grim smile. And it turns out I'd rather have a daughter than a corner office. Sophia Washington's office was vandalized overnight, case files scattered, and computers stolen. Though the break-in was clearly targeted, police responded slowly and showed minimal interest in collecting evidence. Just random burglars, the responding officer suggested, echoing the dismissive investigation of Janelle's home break-in. The next morning, leaving the hospital to meet with Sophia about the lawsuit, Janelle's car swerved dangerously on a steep hill. A mechanic later confirmed her brake lines had been professionally cut, not completely through, but enough to fail after several minutes of driving. This wasn't amateur work, he told her quietly. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. As the pressure and intimidation escalated, an unexpected resource appeared. FBI agent Lisa Carter approached Janelle in the hospital parking garage, showing her credentials, and quickly explaining that she couldn't be seen with Janelle publicly. There's an ongoing federal investigation into corruption in the Westfield Police Department, she revealed. It predates your daughter's case, but what happened to her fits a pattern we've been documenting. I can't officially involve myself in your situation, but I can guide you on evidence, preservation, and personal security. Agent Carter's advice proved invaluable. She recommended specific encryption methods for digital evidence, suggested places to check for surveillance devices, and provided guidance on documenting threats. Most importantly, she confirmed that Janelle's instincts were correct. The coordinated attacks against her family and allies indicated a department-wide effort authorized at the highest levels. While Janelle couldn't trust the local police for protection, the community stepped up. Darius King organized a rotating security detail of trusted community members to watch over the hospital room and Janelle's home. Young activists took shifts monitoring police scanner traffic for any mentions of Zora or Janelle. Emma Larson faced her own backlash at Westfield University, where administrative officials suddenly questioned her scholarship eligibility and campus housing assignment. Anonymous threats appeared under her dorm room door, and her car was vandalized with the word traitor scratched into the paint. Despite the intimidation, Emma continued speaking publicly about what she had witnessed, organizing campus demonstrations supporting Zora. Several of Janelle's former military colleagues created an encrypted communication system for their growing network of allies, using techniques that would make surveillance difficult. The technical security was necessary as Wallace's department grew increasingly desperate to identify and neutralize everyone involved in Zora's case. Amid the escalating battle, a small miracle occurred. During a routine neurological assessment, Zora squeezed Janelle's hand in response to the doctor's request. Though she remained unconscious, the voluntary movement suggested improved brain activity. It's a positive sign, the neurologist cautioned, but we're still looking at a very long recovery process if she regains consciousness. The department's awareness of Zora's slight improvement was unnervingly immediate. That same evening, as Janelle sat by her daughter's bedside, reviewing legal documents with Michael Chief Wallace himself, appeared in the doorway. It was the first time Janelle had seen him in person, a tall man with cold eyes and a rigid posture that his tailored uniform couldn't quite disguise. Two uniformed officers flanked him, their hands resting conspicuously on their weapons. Mrs. Wright, Wallace said with a thin smile that never reached his eyes. I wanted to personally express the department's continued concern for your daughter's condition. The words were appropriate, but his tone made them a mockery. Before Janelle could respond, Wallace stepped closer to Zora's bed. Such a tragedy when young people make poor choices that lead to unfortunate consequences. He turned to Janelle, the pretense of sympathy vanishing. Some people don't know when to quit, Mrs. Wright. They push and push until something breaks. I'd hate to see anything else break in your life. The threat hung in the air like poison gas, as Wallace nodded curtly, and left his officers following in lockstep. Michael, who had remained silent during the exchange, let out a shaky breath. "That man just threatened you in front of witnesses in your daughter's hospital room." Janelle nodded slowly, her mind racing. "Yes," she replied, "and that was his first mistake." She pulled out her phone, showing Michael the recording app that had been running throughout Wallace's visit. His second mistake was underestimating who he's dealing with. That night, as the city slept, Janelle added Chief Wallace's direct threat to her growing arsenal of evidence. The chief had shown his hand, revealing both his personal involvement and his desperation. In chess terms, he had sacrificed position for an intimidation play that failed. And Janelle, the patient strategist, was already planning her next 3 moves. 1 month after Zora's attack, Andre Peterson published his explosive exposé, not in the Westfield Chronicle, which had fired him as expected, but in the National Beacon, an independent news outlet known for investigative journalism. The comprehensive article included Emma's unedited video internal department documents, provided by Detective Jones, and statistical analysis, showing the pattern of racial targeting by the Westfield Police Department. Most damning was the audio recording of Chief Wallace's thinly veiled threat at Zora's bedside. Within hours of publication, national news networks picked up the story. Cable news channels ran the footage of Zora's beating on heavy rotation, with panels of legal experts and civil rights leaders discussing the implications. Social media exploded with the hashtag number Justice for Zora, which began trending nationally. Celebrities and athletes shared the story, amplifying the outrage. What had been a local struggle suddenly gained national attention, shining an unwelcome spotlight on Westfield's power structure. Chief Wallace, clearly unprepared for the scale of the response, called an emergency press conference. Visibly agitated and sweating under the camera lights, he doubled down on the department's narrative. This so-called exposé is nothing but a collection of out-of-context clips, illegally obtained documents, and outright fabrications, he insisted. Officer Miller and his colleagues were responding to credible reports of illegal activity. When Zora Wright became combative, they used appropriate force to subdue her. Her injuries, while regrettable, were the result of her own resistance. The press conference backfired spectacularly when a reporter from a national network played Wallace's recorded threat on a laptop and asked him to explain his hospital visit. Wallace's face flushed as he stammered through a denial, claiming the recording was manipulated, before abruptly ending the conference. The department's only concession was transferring Officer Miller to administrative duty, not suspending him, pending an internal review. City Mayor Robert Thompson, who had remained conspicuously silent until now, issued a carefully worded statement supporting the police department while calling the incident an isolated situation that does not reflect the values of our community. He announced the formation of a community dialogue committee that would explore ways to build trust between citizens and law enforcement. The committee, Janelle noted with bitter amusement, consisted primarily of Wallace's supporters and city contractors dependent on municipal funding. Congressman Ward kept his promise, bringing Zora's case to the attention of the House Judiciary Committee. In a passionate floor speech that quickly went viral, Ward connected Zora's assault to the broader pattern of police brutality against Black Americans. "This is not about one incident or one department," he declared. "This is about a systemic failure to hold law enforcement accountable when they abuse the very citizens they swore to protect." When a 16-year-old honor student can be beaten into a coma for exercising her First Amendment rights, and the system's first response is to protect the officers responsible, we have lost our way as a nation. The national attention brought prominent civil rights leaders to Westfield. Reverend Marcus Johnson, whose organization had been fighting police brutality for decades, organized a major demonstration that drew over 10,000 people to the city center. Standing before the massive crowd, Janelle gave her first public speech since the assault. The quiet hospital administrator had transformed into a powerful voice for justice, her military bearing evident as she addressed the sea of supportive faces. "My daughter was attacked for one reason. She dared to document the truth." Janelle stated, her voice clear and unwavering. She believed in her rights as an American citizen. She believed in justice. She believed the law would protect her. "The officers who beat her, the officials who covered it up, they didn't just attack my child. They attacked those fundamental American principles." The crowd erupted in supportive chants as Janelle continued. "I served this country to protect our constitutional rights. I never imagined I would need to protect my own child from those sworn to uphold those same rights. But make no mistake, I will fight with everything I have, not just for Zora, but for every child who has been brutalized by those who abuse their power. This stops now. As Janelle's speech circulated online, more victims of the department came forward. Families who had been silenced by fear or settlements with non-disclosure agreements began sharing their stories, creating a damning pattern impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents. A 19-year-old college student described being beaten unconscious during a traffic stop. A 14-year-old boy showed scars from a police dog attack during a mistaken home raid. A middle-aged teacher displayed photos of injuries sustained while observing a protest. Each new testimony reinforced the systemic nature of the brutality. The department's attempts to discredit these new witnesses backfired repeatedly. When they claimed the college student had a criminal record, journalists discovered the record belonged to someone with a similar name. When they questioned the teacher's political affiliations, her decades of community service and teaching awards emerged instead. Each failed attack only strengthened public sympathy for the victims. The turning point came when an anonymous source within the department leaked internal communications showing deliberate targeting of black youth. Email exchanges between Wallace and his command staff referred to community centers in minority neighborhoods as thug recruitment stations and discussed strategies to make examples of young activists. One email from Wallace to Officer Miller specifically mentioned the planned raid on the community center, instructing officers to teach these kids what happens when they play at Revolution. The department's hastily organized community outreach event, designed to counter the growing public relations disaster, turned catastrophic when Chief Wallace, believing his microphone was off during a break, was recorded telling a subordinate, "These people need to understand their place. We're the thin blue line between civilization and these animals." The racial slur broadcast live on local television destroyed any remaining credibility Wallace might have had with moderate supporters. President Andrews, who had thus far remained above the fray, mentioned Zora's case briefly in his weekly address, stating that his administration was watching the situation closely and believed that no American citizen should fear those sworn to protect them. Though carefully non-committal, the mere mention from the White House elevated the case further. At the hospital, Zora's condition showed signs of improvement. She opened her eyes for the first time since the attack, though she remained unresponsive to verbal commands. Neurologists were cautiously optimistic, but warned that the road to recovery would be long and uncertain. The extent of potential brain damage remained unknown. As Janelle reviewed the astronomical medical bills already exceeding $700,000, the hospital's financial office informed her of an anonymous donation that had covered all of Zora's expenses. Only later, through Detective Jones, did Janelle discover the source, a fund created by police union members who were disgusted by what had happened, but too afraid to speak publicly. "Not all cops are like Miller," and Wallace Jones told her quietly. "Some of us actually believe in protecting and serving. Some of us are just as horrified as you are." As the pressure mounted on the department and city leadership, Janelle allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The isolated fight had become a movement. The department's wall of silence was cracking. Justice for Zora, once seemingly impossible, now felt within reach. But Janelle, with her military strategic training, knew better than to underestimate a wounded opponent. Wallace and his allies had lost ground, but they still held considerable power, and desperate adversaries were often the most dangerous. Rumors of a federal investigation sent shockwaves through the department, creating a panic that manifested as aggression. Chief Wallace and Mayor Thompson retreated behind closed doors with city attorneys and emerged with a coordinated strategy designed to destroy Janelle's credibility and intimidate her supporters. The first sign of the counteroffensive came when Janelle received notice of an IRS audit examining her tax returns for the past 7 years. The audit specifically questioned her military service deductions and charitable contributions, areas where discrepancies could be manufactured or exaggerated. Anonymous whistleblowers suddenly contacted military affairs reporters, claiming Janelle had exaggerated her intelligence role and had actually been discharged under questionable circumstances. Though her military records clearly contradicted these allegations, the accusations circulated widely through Reynolds' media empire, which now included 15 local television stations, 30 newspapers, and dozens of radio stations across the state. The media blitz intensified when Officer Miller appeared on American Morning with Caroline Burke, a sympathetic talk show where he portrayed himself as the victim. Wiping away tears, Miller described how the anti-police climate had destroyed his life. "I was just doing my job," he insisted. "I've dedicated my life to protecting people, and now my family gets death threats because of a manipulated video taken out of context." No mention was made of Zora's ongoing coma or injuries, and the host asked no challenging questions about the discrepancies in the official report. The police union issued a forceful statement defending the officers involved and threatening a citywide slowdown if the politically motivated persecution continued. Officers cannot effectively protect the community when they fear that lawful performance of their duties will result in their crucifixion in the media and abandonment by city leadership, the statement declared. The safety of Westfield residents is at stake. Sophia Washington received notice of a Bar Association complaint alleging ethical violations in her handling of Zora's case. The complaint, filed anonymously, but written with legal precision that suggested department involvement, accused her of witness tampering and evidence fabrication. Though baseless, the complaint would require months of hearings and documentation to dismiss. Michael's former law firm delivered their promised ultimatum. His partnership was unanimously terminated with several partners, citing conduct detrimental to the firm's reputation. More disturbing was the freezing of his accounts, pending investigation of potential financial improprieties, a transparent attempt to cut off funding for Zora's legal battle. Congressman Ward faced a suddenly announced primary challenger, a former police union leader whose campaign received an immediate infusion of $500,000 from police associations across the state. Billboards appeared overnight in Ward's district, showing his face alongside phrases like "soft on crime" and "abandons our officers." Agent Carter was transferred to a field office in Alaska, effectively removing her from any involvement in the Westfield investigation. Her replacement, a veteran agent with ties to Chief Wallace's brother himself, a former FBI supervisor, immediately declared that previous investigative directions were misguided and lacked objective basis. Emma Larson was called before the university's Academic Integrity Committee to address allegations of plagiarism in a paper submitted 2 years earlier. Her scholarship was placed under review, and the University Housing Office suddenly discovered administrative errors, requiring her immediate relocation from her dorm. Darius King was arrested during a peaceful protest on an outstanding misdemeanor warrant from a parking violation 3 years earlier. He spent 2 nights in jail before Sophia could arrange bail, during which he reported being held in isolation and denied food for extended periods. The mayor announced an independent review board to investigate the incident, staffed primarily with former law enforcement officials with ties to Wallace, including Wallace's former captain from his previous department. Janelle's home surveillance system, installed after the first break-in, captured footage of 2 plainclothes officers placing something in her yard at 3 in the morning. When she reviewed the footage with Michael, they agreed not to touch whatever had been planted, instead documenting its presence with time-stamped photographs and video. "They're getting desperate," Michael observed. "This is sloppy." A tech-savvy supporter in the growing justice movement helped Janelle compile all her evidence into a secure, time-stamped blockchain record that couldn't be altered or erased. This digital vault included a second, previously unreleased video showing Officer Miller at a private police gathering, laughingly reenacting his assault on Zora to the amusement of his colleagues. When this video began circulating online, the department claimed it was digitally manipulated, despite 3 independent forensic analysts confirming its authenticity. Did you know that many police departments have a history of closing ranks and retaliating against those who expose misconduct? Comment number 1. If you believe police reform is urgently needed in America. Like this video if you think the system too often protects bad officers instead of victims, and subscribe to see more stories of courageous individuals fighting against corruption. What would you do if powerful institutions were trying to destroy your reputation while your child fought for their life? Would you have Janelle's strength to keep fighting? As the counterattack intensified, Zora's condition took a severe downturn. A secondary infection developed around her breathing tube, sending her temperature dangerously high and causing seizures that further threatened her brain function. Dr. Santos delivered the devastating news. Even if Zora survived this setback, the likelihood of permanent brain damage had increased significantly. The prolonged coma, combined with the seizures, has affected areas controlling motor function and possibly cognitive abilities, he explained gently. We won't know the full extent until she regains consciousness. If she regains consciousness. For the first time since the assault, Janelle felt her resolve wavering. The coordinated attacks had isolated her from institutional support, threatened her few allies, drained their financial resources, and now Zora's prognosis was deteriorating. The weight of it all, the constant vigilance, the legal battles, the financial strain, the threats, and most of all watching her brilliant daughter struggle simply to breathe, pressed down on her with crushing force. A disturbing incident in the hospital heightened her anxiety further. Returning from a brief break, Janelle found an unfamiliar nurse adjusting Zora's IV. When questioned, the woman claimed to be a floating nurse assigned for the shift, but something about her evasive answers raised Janelle's suspicions. A call to the nursing supervisor revealed no floating nurse had been assigned to Zora's case. By the time security arrived, the woman had disappeared, and a review of Zora's bag showed signs of tampering. Though tests revealed no harmful substances had been introduced, the violation of Zora's most vulnerable space shattered any remaining sense of safety. Working with Dr. Santos, Janelle arranged for a trusted nurse to maintain 24-hour watch on Zora with strict protocols for medication administration and visitor screening. The hospital, alarmed by the potential liability, finally agreed to these extraordinary measures. As Janelle sat by her daughter's bed that night, holding the hand that had once written brilliant essays and built award-winning science projects, she allowed herself a rare moment of doubt. "I don't know if I can win this, baby," she whispered to Zora's unresponsive form. "They have so much power, so many resources. Maybe I should take whatever settlement they offer, get you the best care possible, and try to rebuild our lives somewhere else." In the silence of the hospital room, broken only by the rhythmic sounds of the ventilator, Janelle Wright, former intelligence analyst, hospital administrator, and now reluctant activist, confronted the possibility of defeat. The system she was fighting was designed to exhaust challengers, to make the cost of seeking justice so high that surrender became the only rational option. For a few dark hours, as rain streaked the hospital windows, and Zora fought yet another fever, Janelle wondered if the system might win after all. 2 months after the attack, momentum seemed to be slowing. National media attention had shifted to newer crises, and local coverage had returned to the carefully neutral tone that Reynolds' media empire preferred. Chief Wallace appeared on a prime-time national news program, calmly explaining how his department had been unfairly maligned by activists with a political agenda. With practiced sincerity, he expressed sympathy for Zora's condition, while subtly reinforcing the narrative that her own actions had led to the unfortunate incident. The polished performance, unchallenged by the interviewer, seemed to be shifting public perception. The Justice Department publicly declined to open an investigation, citing ongoing local processes that should be allowed to conclude. Mayor Thompson, emboldened by the federal inaction, announced that the internal review had cleared Officer Miller of wrongdoing. Miller would be returning to regular patrol duty the following week. As Janelle drove from the hospital to her home to shower and change clothes, the weight of these setbacks pressed down on her. For the first time in weeks, she turned her car toward Grace Baptist Church, where Zora had been baptized as a child. Though they hadn't attended regularly in recent years, Janelle found herself drawn to the quiet sanctuary, seeking something she couldn't name. Perhaps comfort, perhaps strength, perhaps just a moment's peace from the quiet, relentless battle. Inside the church, Pastor Williams recognized her immediately. After offering quiet prayers for Zora's recovery, he mentioned that someone else had been asking about her situation. "Judge Martha Hobson has been following your daughter's case closely," he said. "She's been wanting to reach out to you." The name stirred a vague recognition in Janelle's mind. Judge Hobson had retired from the circuit court 5 years earlier, after a distinguished career, known for fairness and integrity. Pastor Williams arranged a meeting for that afternoon at the judge's home, a modest bungalow in one of Westfield's historic neighborhoods. Judge Hobson, a dignified woman in her 70s, welcomed Janelle with unexpected warmth. "I've been following your fight with great interest, Mrs. Wright," she said, leading Janelle to a study lined with law books and family photographs. "What happened to your daughter is unconscionable, but sadly not surprising to me." Over tea, Judge Hobson revealed why she had been following Zora's case so closely. "My grandson Marcus was 17 when Westfield officers beat him during a traffic stop 8 years ago. He wasn't as seriously injured as your daughter, but the trauma changed him. He abandoned his college plans, developed severe anxiety, moved away from Westfield entirely." Her eyes grew distant with the painful memory. "I tried to fight it through proper channels. I had resources, connections, legal knowledge. But evidence disappeared, witnesses changed their stories, and the officers closed ranks. That's when I realized the corruption went beyond a few bad officers. What Judge Hobson revealed next transformed Janelle's understanding of Westfield's power structure. For 5 years, the judge had been quietly collecting evidence on the department and its connections to city government. She opened a locked cabinet and removed several thick binders of documents. After I failed to get justice for Marcus, I began gathering information: court records, financial disclosures, property transfers, campaign contributions. The pattern became clear. The documents revealed a sophisticated corruption network. Chief Wallace and Mayor Thompson were involved in a scheme using civil asset forfeiture funds, money and property seized during drug arrests, to enrich themselves and their allies. Property confiscated from predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods was being channeled through shadow companies connected to city officials. Police who participated were rewarded with promotions and choice assignments. Those who questioned the practice were marginalized or forced out. This explains why they're fighting so hard against your daughter's case, Judge Hobson explained. It's not just about police brutality, it's about protecting a lucrative criminal enterprise. If your lawsuit proceeds to discovery, financial records could expose everything. Armed with this crucial context, Janelle connected with the National Civil Rights Alliance, an organization with resources far beyond what Wallace's department could counter. Their legal team, reviewing the evidence Janelle had collected alongside Judge Hobson's financial records, identified a clear pattern of racial profiling that violated federal consent decrees. The NCRA's statistical analysis showed that 93% of the department's asset forfeitures came from Black and Latino residents, often without criminal charges ever being filed. Michael, now fully committed to the case despite his professional sacrifice, worked with the NCRA's attorneys to prepare legal strategies that would expose the broader corruption. Emma Larson, despite continued harassment at the university, organized a coalition of student groups across the state. Their demonstrations kept public attention focused on Zora's case, even as traditional media coverage waned. Andre Peterson formed an independent journalist collective that began investigating department activities, publishing their findings on digital platforms beyond Reynolds' influence. The department's intimidation efforts intensified as they sensed their losing position. An unmarked police cruiser parked outside Janelle's home, each night lights occasionally flashing when she appeared at windows. Strange calls came at all hours with nothing but breathing on the line when answered. But Janelle had developed immunity to these tactics, and more importantly, she had devised a strategic response. Drawing on her military intelligence training, Janelle created an elaborate sting operation. She deliberately leaked misinformation about a potential settlement meeting through channels she suspected were monitored. When Officer Miller appeared at the suggested location, he found not Janelle, but a community activist wearing a concealed recording device. Believing he was speaking to a potential witness, Miller made explicit threats about what would happen to Janelle and others who continued pursuing the case. The recording, crystal clear and legally obtained in a single-party consent state, captured Miller, stating that Wallace has people everywhere and accidents can be arranged for problems that won't go away. Congressman Ward, despite the well-funded primary challenge, delivered Janelle's complete evidence package directly to the Attorney General. The documentation, meticulously organized and annotated, included Judge Hobson's financial records, Miller's recorded threats, evidence of witness intimidation, and the department's pattern of constitutional violations. The package was too substantial, too well documented to be ignored even with Wallace's connections. As the legal and political pressure built to a critical mass, Janelle received the call she had been desperately waiting for. Doctor. Santos, his voice breaking protocol to show genuine emotion, told her to come to the hospital immediately. When she arrived, breathless with fear that Zora had taken a turn for the worse, she found something miraculous instead. Zora's eyes were open, focused, aware. And when Janelle approached the bed, her daughter's cracked lips formed words for the first time in 2 months. Mom, what happened? The doctors cautioned that Zora's recovery would be long and difficult. She had no memory of the assault and limited recollection of events leading up to it. Her right side showed weakness that might indicate permanent motor impairment. Cognitive testing revealed processing delays that concerned the neurologists. But she was awake. She recognized her family, and most miraculously, the brilliant mind that had earned her early college acceptance seemed largely intact. As Zora slowly reoriented to consciousness, learning about her injury in carefully measured doses, Janelle felt the first genuine hope since the nightmare began. The strategic battle for justice had consumed every waking moment for months, but seeing her daughter's eyes focus on her face, hearing her voice again, however weak, these simple miracles recentered Janelle's purpose. This fight had never been about systems or principles in the abstract. It had always been about this: a mother's determination to create a world where her child could be safe, where those who had harmed her would face consequences, where other mothers' children might be spared similar pain. In that hospital room, holding her daughter's hand as Zora drifted between wakefulness and healing sleep, Janelle Wright made a new promise. The corruption that had nearly taken her daughter's life would be exposed completely, no matter what it took. The awakening of Zora Wright would become the awakening of an entire community to injustice too long ignored. With Zora conscious, and Wallace's department losing control of the narrative, the corrupt system began its inevitable collapse. Internal sources reported that Wallace had ordered the destruction of evidence related to Zora's case and dozens of other incidents of misconduct. What he didn't realize was that Janelle had anticipated this move weeks earlier, working with Detective Jones to secure backup copies of crucial files. The destruction attempt itself became powerful evidence of obstruction. The FBI raid came with no warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. Agent Carter, reinstated to her previous position after a congressional inquiry into her suspicious transfer, led a team of federal agents into police headquarters with warrants for documents, electronic records, and the arrest of several officers. Officer Miller tipped off minutes before the raid attempted to flee the jurisdiction. Airport security cameras captured his panicked run through the terminal before agents intercepted him at the gate, his hastily packed bag containing $38,000 in cash and a passport that wasn't his. Mayor Thompson held an emergency press conference, visibly shaken as he distanced himself from the department. "I am shocked and deeply disturbed by these allegations," he claimed, his usually confident voice wavering. "If these accusations prove true, they represent a betrayal of public trust that occurred without my knowledge or approval." Few believed his protestations of innocence, especially after Judge Hobson released documents showing Thompson's signature on questionable property transfers involving seized assets. Detective Jones, reinstated with an apology from the city council, provided devastating testimony to a special grand jury. His meticulous records of departmental wrongdoing, maintained secretly for years, outlined how the corruption had spread through the ranks, rewarding officers who participated and punishing those who objected. Media mogul Victor Reynolds faced his own legal troubles when investigations revealed his companies had engaged in illegal surveillance of Janelle and other activists at Wallace's request. Federal communications regulations became yet another avenue for accountability as his broadcasting licenses came under review. Zora's recovery continued slowly but steadily. Though still confined to the hospital, she began providing limited testimony from her bed, assisted by neurologists who certified her memory function was reliable despite gaps surrounding the assault itself. When recordings of her testimony reached the public, they devastated the department's defense. Her clear, precise descriptions of officers separating teens by race, her account of asserting her legal right to record police actions, and her confusion about why she was being attacked generated renewed public outrage. "I remember saying, 'I know my rights,'" Zora stated in a voice still weakened from months on a ventilator. "And the officer, I think his name tag said Miller, he said, 'Rights won't help you now.' And then they started hitting me. I remember the pain and not being able to breathe and thinking I was going to die. I kept thinking about my mom, how she'd never know what really happened to me." Janelle's own testimony before a special congressional hearing carried live on national networks provided the systemic context for Zora's assault. Her military background lent credibility, as she methodically outlined the corruption pattern using evidence gathered over months. "This wasn't about one bad officer or one unfortunate incident," she explained. "This was about a department that viewed certain citizens, specifically black and brown citizens, as targets rather than community members deserving protection. The assault on my daughter was a direct result of policies and practices designed to intimidate, control, and exploit vulnerable communities." The video of her testimony went viral with tens of millions of views across platforms. President Andrews called Janelle directly a conversation that lasted nearly an hour. "Your courage has exposed injustices that demand a national response," the president told her. "I give you my word that federal resources will ensure complete transparency and accountability in your daughter's case." As the evidence mounted, the department attempted one final character assassination campaign. Anonymous sources claimed that Zora had extensive juvenile records that had been sealed, that Janelle had fabricated evidence, that the entire case was orchestrated by anti-police extremists. These desperate allegations collapsed spectacularly when Officer Clayton Reed accidentally sent a group text outlining the smear strategy to several journalists instead of fellow officers. The message included instructions to plant contradictions in her story and find anything in the mother's background we can use. The police union, reading the shifting political winds, abandoned their defense of the officers involved. Their carefully worded statement cited new evidence that contradicts previous understandings of the incident and promised full cooperation with legitimate investigations. Translation: they were cutting loose the officers to save the institution. The district attorney, after months of reluctance, announced criminal charges against Officer Miller and 2 others involved in Zora's beating. The charges included aggravated assault, official misconduct, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations, carrying potential sentences of up to 30 years. Chief Wallace, facing imminent indictment himself, held a defiant press conference on the steps of police headquarters. Surrounded by a dwindling circle of supporters, he denounced the witch hunt against his department and refused calls for his resignation. "This department has protected this city for decades," he declared, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool temperature. "We will not be destroyed by politically motivated attacks and media manipulation." The mayor, sensing his political survival required sacrifice, finally called for Wallace's resignation. The gesture came too late to save Thompson's own reputation. The city council, after reviewing financial records provided by Judge Hobson, voted no confidence in both the mayor and chief. The state governor appointed a special prosecutor with full independence to oversee all cases related to the department's misconduct. In a final desperate backlash, Janelle began receiving explicit death threats from police supporters. Anonymous calls described in graphic detail what would happen to her and Zora. Online forums devoted to law enforcement contained posts from self-identified officers discussing how to solve the right problem permanently. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. A security detail of veterans, including several of Janelle's former military colleagues, established round-the-clock protection. Neighbors formed human chains around her home when threatening vehicles drove by. Local businesses contributed security equipment and services. Pastor Williams organized an interfaith coalition that maintained constant presence at the hospital as Zora was transferred to a specialized rehabilitation facility. The protection extended beyond physical security. When Wallace's supporters attempted to attack Janelle's reputation online, tech volunteers countered with positive content, highlighting her military service and community work. When extremist groups planned demonstrations against her, counter-protesters outnumbered them 10-1. The city of Westfield was transforming, with residents who had long accepted the status quo finally recognizing the corruption in their midst. Community meetings that once drew dozens now attracted hundreds. City council sessions ran late into the night as citizens demanded transparency and accountability. Local businesses removed Blue Lives Matter signs that had been displayed out of fear rather than conviction. The awakening spread to neighboring communities, facing similar issues with their police departments. Citizen oversight groups formed in towns across the state demanding access to use of force records and body camera footage. State legislators, responding to constituent pressure, introduced bills to eliminate qualified immunity and require independent investigation of all police-involved injuries. Zora, watching this transformation from her rehabilitation facility, found purpose in her recovery. Despite ongoing physical challenges, she insisted on being kept informed about the case developments. "They tried to silence me," she told her mother, during a particularly difficult physical therapy session. "Every time I stand up again, every time I speak again, I'm proving they failed." 3 months after the brutal assault that was intended to teach a black teenager to know her place, Zora Wright had instead helped teach an entire community about justice, accountability, and the power of perseverance. And as federal indictments multiplied and civil rights investigations expanded, it became clear that the system that had protected Wallace for so long was finally irrevocably breaking down. 3 months to the day after Officer Miller's baton first struck Zora Wright, President Andrews invited Janelle and Zora to the White House. Zora, making remarkable progress, but still requiring a wheelchair for longer distances, wore her acceptance letter to MIT as a folded paper heart in her pocket, a talisman of the future she refused to surrender. The Oval Office meeting, initially scheduled for 15 minutes, extended to nearly an hour as the president listened to their experiences and shared his own administration's efforts at police reform. What followed surprised even Janelle, who had learned to expect the unexpected. President Andrews invited them to join him for a nationally televised address from the East Room. With cameras broadcasting to millions of Americans, the president announced comprehensive police reform legislation named the Right Justice Act. This bill will create mandatory civilian oversight of law enforcement, end qualified immunity that shields officers from accountability, establish national use of force standards, and provide resources for communities to reimagine public safety. President Andrews explained. No American should fear those sworn to protect them. No parent should watch their child suffer as Janelle Wright has watched Zora suffer. Then came the moment that would define the culmination of Janelle's battle. President Andrews turned to the television cameras and stated, "Effective immediately, I am directing the Attorney General to supersede local authority and remove Commissioner Raymond Wallace from his position pending the outcome of federal 2 criminal proceedings." The image of Wallace being escorted from police headquarters by federal agents broadcast live on split screen became instantly iconic. Officer Miller and 3 others were indicted on federal civil rights charges carrying sentences up to 30 years. Mayor Thompson faced separate corruption charges related to the misappropriation of seized assets. Detective Jones, the whistleblower who risked everything to expose department corruption, was appointed interim police commissioner by a newly empowered city council. His first official act was to establish a civilian review board with genuine investigative authority. With the substantial settlement from their civil lawsuit against the city and police department, Janelle established the Right Justice Foundation to support victims of police violence. The foundation provided legal assistance, medical cost coverage, and therapeutic services for survivors and their families. Emma Larson and Darius King expanded their youth organization nationally with Janelle's funding and guidance, creating chapters in cities across the country to train young people in legal rights community, organizing, and political engagement. Michael returned to legal practice with a new focus on civil rights cases, partnering with Sophia Washington to represent victims of similar injustices. Their firm became a powerful force for accountability, with a growing network of attorneys nationwide volunteering their services. The Westfield Police Department underwent complete restructuring under a federal consent decree. New recruitment standards, training protocols, and accountability measures transformed the culture that had protected abusive officers for decades. Body cameras became mandatory, with footage automatically uploaded to servers beyond department control. Sophia Washington, whose persistence and legal brilliance had been crucial to exposing the department's corruption, was appointed to the federal bench by President Andrews, where she would help shape law enforcement accountability standards nationwide. Zora's recovery continued to defy medical expectations. Though she still struggled with right-side weakness and occasional speech hesitations, her cognitive abilities remained remarkably intact. After months of intensive rehabilitation, she accepted a modified scholarship to MIT, where accommodations were made for her ongoing recovery. "I'm going to study neuroscience," she told reporters at a foundation event. "I want to help others with brain injuries to understand how trauma affects neural pathways and how to repair them." She paused, her voice strengthening as she added, "What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. But since it did, I'm going to use it to help others heal." Just as the Wright family began adjusting to their new normal, a final unexpected development emerged. An anonymous package arrived at Janelle's home containing Chief Wallace's private files, documents he had kept as insurance against betrayal by his allies. The files revealed a corruption pattern extending back decades, implicating officials throughout state government, judges who had quashed legitimate cases, prosecutors who had buried evidence, and politicians who had protected the system in exchange for campaign support and personal favors. The revelation extended far beyond Westfield, suggesting similar patterns across multiple jurisdictions. On a crisp autumn evening, Janelle sat with Zora in their living room, reviewing the college course catalog together. Despite everything, they had created moments of normalcy, planning Zora's classes, discussing dormitory options, debating whether Boston winters would be too harsh for a girl raised in the milder climate of Westfield. Zora held her MIT acceptance letter, the paper now worn from being repeatedly folded and unfolded during difficult therapy sessions. "We did it, Mom," she said, her speech still occasionally halting but improving weekly. "They tried to silence me to make me disappear, but here I am, going to MIT just like I planned." Janelle smiled at her daughter, marveling at her resilience. Before she could respond, her phone rang with Congressman Ward's name on the screen. His news was unexpected. President Andrews was forming a National Police Reform Commission to develop comprehensive standards for departments across the country. He wanted Janelle to lead it. The president believes your unique perspective, as a military veteran, as a medical administrator, and most importantly, as a mother who fought the system and won, makes you the right person to guide this transformation, Ward explained. This isn't just about Westfield anymore. This is about changing policing across America. As Janelle considered the offer, she realized that her battle had never really been about punishing those who hurt Zora, though accountability remained essential. It had been about creating a world where no other mother would receive that devastating phone call, where no other brilliant young person would have their future threatened because of the color of their skin, where power could not shield those who abused it. Zora, sensing her mother's thoughts, reached across with her stronger left hand to squeeze Janelle's. The system didn't change for me, she said with wisdom beyond her years. But now, because of what happened to me, you can help change the system for everyone else. Her smile, still slightly asymmetrical from nerve damage, nevertheless radiated determination. We're not done yet, Mom. Not even close. As Janelle accepted the commission appointment, she reflected on the journey from that devastating day in the hospital to this moment of purpose and possibility. The path had been unimaginably difficult, fraught with danger and despair, but it had also revealed the power of persistence, the strength of community, and the possibility of transforming pain into progress. Justice for Zora had become justice for many, and would hopefully prevent injustice for countless more. What's your take on this story? Do you believe that individual citizens can really change deeply entrenched systems of injustice? Comment below with your thoughts on police reform and accountability. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe to support more content highlighting stories of courage against corruption. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the ongoing struggle for justice in America. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey through one mother's fight to transform tragedy into meaningful change. Until next time, remember that justice requires vigilance, courage, and the unwavering belief that change is possible. The story of Janelle and Zora Wright reveals profound truths about justice in America. First, systems designed to protect power will fight viciously when challenged, using every available resource to silence those who expose wrongdoing. Second, isolated individuals rarely succeed against entrenched corruption. It takes building coalitions across different communities, professions, and power structures. Third, documentation is crucial. Janelle's military training taught her to preserve evidence, systematically creating an unassailable record that even media manipulation couldn't discredit. The most powerful lesson is that change requires both courageous individuals and awakened communities. Janelle's determination sparked a movement, but that movement succeeded because others recognized their responsibility to stand alongside her. When everyday citizens realized their silence-enabled corruption, transformation became possible. We also learned that justice isn't just about punishment for wrongdoers, but about creating new systems that prevent future injustice. Janelle ultimately understood that her daughter's suffering could catalyze structural reforms, protecting countless others. Finally, this story teaches us that ordinary people contain extraordinary strength when fighting for those they love. Janelle wasn't a politician or activist. She was a mother who refused to accept that power could shield those who harmed her child. In that refusal, she discovered a capacity for strategic resilience that transformed not just her city but an entire nation. What would you do if someone you loved faced injustice while powerful institutions protected the perpetrators? Would you have Janelle's courage to fight not just for justice, but for systemic change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in holding power accountable, please like this video to help it reach others who need to hear this story. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about ordinary people creating extraordinary change in the face of oppression. And if you know someone struggling against seemingly impossible odds, share this story as a reminder that persistence, strategy, and community can overcome even the most entrenched corruption. Thank you for bearing witness to Janelle and Zora's journey. May their story inspire you to stand firm when facing your own battles against injustice.